Thanks for your company. We've got details of many stories to share with you today, and coming up shortly, the Ghana Center for Democratic Development has expressed worry about the violence that characterized the just-ended voter registration exercise, describing the developments as having the potential to derail the country's democratic gains. Ahead of the 2020 general election, CEDEO is warning if major violent acts like shooting, stabbing, and burning of property are not nipped in the bud, the country could witness more deaths and vandalism of state and political party-owned property, as it happened in some constituencies. Head of Security and Governance at CEDEO, Nana Kwabena Brampa, said this at a roundtable discussion on measures needed to ensure a violent-free election and political environment through the enforcement of existing laws.
Across all both MPP and NDC primaries, we have issued the voter register. So that's the basic document that always orchestrates violence in the electoral process. That's why we have more registered violent cases in the pre-election environment. For the 2020 voter registration exercise is no exception. We have had a number of election-related violence. The difference between now and us NS portrayed is that in this voter registration exercise, compared to 2012 and the previous ones, we have recorded more major cases than the previous ones. As NS said, in the previous one, we had more cases recorded in the minor cases, abuse of incumbency, threat of violence, issuing threats on the social media and other things. But this one, we have had a lot of major cases, being deaths and the burning of property and other things. This is the data showing the occurrence of the incident that we had. You could see out of the 20 major cases had 14. About 70% of the cases are major. This is the trend that we see as dangerous because comparing to 2012-2016, we had more cases, but most of the cases were at the minor areas. That did not result into death. That did not result into injuries, property burns, and other things. But this one have recorded major cases. So you see 14 of them, 7% were major incidents, 2 deaths, several injuries, and properties burnt and destroyed. 20% were moderate cases that involves intimidation, threat of violence, harm, incitement languages, and abuse of public order acts, use of abusive language, and vandalization of publicity materials, as NS said. And you could see so many of the publicity materials, not only for political parties, but even electoral commission materials. Directional signs to registration centers were destroyed. So everybody is affected. Then just 1% of the minor incidents, rumors and allegations. So it tells you that, yes, we have had increase of cases, but the categories of cases we are recording are more falling on the dangerous aspect of it that results in damage to properties and deaths. So we need to be very careful as to how to tackle the issues.
Well, let's stay on elections. The Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, CEDEO, is asking the Ghana Police Service to speed up investigations into violence recorded at centers and share updates with the public to strengthen confidence of voters. They also make demands of the EC in recommendations contained in their preliminary report on the voter registration exercise. Joining us is Mausi Dumenu. He's a research analyst at the CEDEO. Thank you so much for your time this morning, sir.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Well,
good morning to your listeners and viewers.
Great to have you here. We've just got about 4 months to the election, and there's a lot of pressure on the Electoral Commission going into the December polls, but we are still making demands of them. Realistically, though, especially with regards to the issue of allowing more persons to register, do you think that the EC will be in the capacity to do that, even as they prepare for the polls?
Okay, thank you. I think that so far, when in continuous observation on the last phase of the mock exercise, there were instances where in terms of registration centers, we had people. A few people in the queue after the time the exercise was ended. And in some cases as well, there were places where we couldn't find so many people. We couldn't find so many people at the registration center after the time the mock was ended. And so going forward, I think the EC has the data of all its polling stations. office registration centers, and then I believe they have like a population that they were expecting for each of these polling stations each of these registration centers to have registered. So I believe they have to do the analysis quickly and then find out where there may be pitfalls. And if they still believe that the thresholds within those registration centers have not been met, then they could find a way to do a sort of mop-up to try and then, fill up for the numbers. So I think this may be one angle to it. But at the same time, we're also considering the time frame within which all these things must happen. Because already, there's a lot of controversy leading up to the exercise, the voter registration exercise, which has ended. And so believe that there's not so much time to go. And the other exercises that are ahead, so for instance, the exhibition exercise is also ahead. All these things need to be done for the register to be certified ahead of the election. So there's really not so much time. But it would be good for the EC to also come up with an analysis that shows that this is what we're expecting, for instance, in this particular registration center or this particular constituency or region. And that when we match the numbers, probably there's a shortfall, or probably we've gone beyond the target that we are looking at. So this would help to inform such a decision.
Well, in your report that you discussed yesterday, you cite 14 major incidents of violence. We've tried education. We've tried involving the political parties to speak to members at the grassroots level to ensure that we record very minimal, or if possible, no incidents of violence at all. But we seem not to be getting anywhere really with our fight against violence relating to our electoral process. What's the problem? What should we be doing, really?
No, Kashiji, can you give me a bit of clarity here? Yesterday we had an event that was on electoral violence.
The round table discussion is what I'm talking about.
I just want to be clear which one it is. Okay, so you mentioned. Okay, so what we did was that. Can you do the question again?
I'm just saying that in your report you cite 14 major incidents of violence, including deaths and various degrees of injuries. And I'm saying that as a people, we've tried education. We've tried engaging political parties to speak to their members at the grassroots level to ensure that we don't record election-related violence. We don't seem to be getting anywhere. This is a registration exercise that has recorded as many as 14 incidents of violence, including deaths. So I'm asking, from the point of CDD, what more should we be doing really to ensure that we're dealing with the problem?
So I believe that this is a whole multifaceted issue. It's an issue that requires a multifaceted approach, okay? And we've mentioned issues around medication, which is also very important, that the electorate needs to know exactly what the rules are, so that these things may know what the rules are. Political parties need to also, they've been engaged, and then they also need to keep engaging their agents who go to the polling station, because usually some of these issues are sparked by polling station agents. That's where the issue starts from. But in all these things, there's also the angle about enforcement of the law. And that is also crucial, because there needs to be a balance between all these things. The education is important, yes. The dialogue between the political parties is also important, because we need to deal with not just the law itself. I mean, the moral suasion aspect is also important, and then that is why all these things are coming in. And so the enforcement part should also come in very well, where there will be the political will to, actually penalize people. I mean, prosecute them for whatever offenses that they have been cited to commit, and then work towards getting a conviction, so that if people are sanctioned, if people are punished, and there's evidence of it that these people have been sanctioned, it would sort of create a deterrent effect. So I believe, as of now, there's not so much deterrent effect, because people have committed crimes in the past. They've not been punished, people have walked free, and so that has created that sense of impunity. And so that is why we are realizing a lot of these issues that are coming up. And so enforcement is key. Just like I said, it's very key.
Let's go back to the issue of requesting the EC to open up the register again. We've been told by the EC that they actually recorded low voter turnout during the mop-up exercise over the weekend. So what really is justifying this call?
Okay, so with this, what I would want to make a bit of reference to produce reports that were generated within this period. And
okay.
What we realized was that I think within the first 3 phases of the exercise, people did not really know much about the EC's movement plan.
Okay.
And all that. I mean, and so there was a big push to get registered within the first phase because you think that if you don't get to register, that is it. They may not come. And so a lot of people, really pushed to get registered within the first few phases of the exercise. And so, and you realize that within the first few phases of the exercise, so for instance, if I take for instance phase 2 or phase 3, the first 3 days, because they know the issue will be here for 6 days, and in people's mind they may not come back. There's that push to get registered at all costs. So you realize that there was a lot of classmen around the voter registration centers within that period. And so it's likely a lot of people may have registered within those times. And even within the last phases of it, it's likely that within the first 3 days of the first 3 days of the registration center, within the last phase of the exercise, a lot of people may have registered. And so that may probably account for the low voter turnout that occurred during the mop-up exercise.
Thank you very much for your time. Mausi Dumenu is research analyst at the CEDEO, speaking on their roundtable discussion on violence during the voter registration exercise, and also sharing some thoughts on CEDEO's statement asking the EC to open up the registration centers for persons who are not able to register over the period, and also asking the police to speed up investigation to strengthen voter confidence. Away from that, the Media Foundation for West Africa says there were about 120 ethical violations in the media during its recent media monitoring. The 2-week study between June 15 and 30 found that hosts of pro-partisan radio stations incited violence and threatened people who belong to the opposing party. Let me bring you more details on that report, especially on the methodology. It was done using a qualitative content analysis and assessed the content of 26 media organizations. Akan language radio stations were chosen, 10 of them, 10 newspapers and 6 news websites. And we'll be delving more into the findings of that particular study. Program Officer of the Media Foundation for West Africa, Kweku Krobi Asante, joins me for more. Thank you so much for your time this morning, sir. Hello, if you can unmute, we'll be glad, because we are struggling to hear you.
Sorry, I was muted.
All right, okay, great to have you. Now, let me just find out from you, beyond the report, which has quite some interesting findings, you covered the period, as I mentioned, June 15 to 30. Out of the total of 963 media content programs, you determined that there were about 116 violations. They had to do with decency, allegations that were not verified, inciting violence. But the interesting point is that pro-party stations were the most culpable. Does it trouble you that this is what is on the ground? And despite this, we seem to be having more stations that are pro-party based?
Thank you for having me once again. And yes, it troubles us very much that the pro-partisan radio stations or media outlets happen to come up again and again. And this is supposed to be the second report when we started the monitoring exercise. On the first report, indeed, the pro-partisan radio stations came at tops in terms of the violation. And then this time we are seeing them again. There could be a lot of explanations or meanings to this, but whatever it is something that unsettles us. It is something that we think that has to be controlled as soon as possible.
In one instance, for example, you record in your report that a pro-party-based radio station called on the audience to destroy the machines being used for registration if they suspect any foul play by the EC. And this was after the Supreme Court had given a judgment on the voter registration case that the NDC had sent there. Beyond the report, have these findings been forwarded to the appropriate courts? Because this goes beyond just caution, doesn't it?
Yes, we think that as much as we agree that it goes beyond caution, we think that the first step is perhaps doing this exercise, putting their names out, naming the people who are doing it, and then showing the kind of principles that they are breaking. Indeed, this is part of a bigger project where we are working together with the media regulatory bodies, the media association, so the GIBA at some point, the GJ at some point, the National Media Commission at some point, even the Peace Council, knowing that around these times when we are heading towards the elections, these ethical principles, as much as they are media-related issues, are also issues relating to peace and stability. And so, yes, we are working with all these organizations to ensure that these issues are controlled and are brought down to its barest forms that we can have it.
So this particular report, have complaints been made to the NMC, for example?
So we released this report just yesterday, and so we are in conversations with them. In fact, they are part of this whole project that we are doing. It's part of our elections project. As you may know, we have a language monitoring project ongoing. This is media ethics, and these are things that we do in conjunction with the National Media Commission and then the other bodies that matter. So yes, we are going to work with them, particularly on this report, to help us bring these violations down.
Now, in your report, again, you mention hosts and programs with the highest ethical violations. And so we know the programs, we know the stations, and we know the persons involved. Have you or any of the organizations you're working with tried reaching out, or is there a plan to reach out to these stations or the persons involved in particular?
Yes, we have a much comprehensive plan of working with all these media outlets, even beyond the people we are monitoring. We think that these are hotspots, media hotspots that control the public opinion, shape thoughts, getting towards the election. So the first step, after we do this report, we share with all the media contacts, including these media outlets that we are monitoring, to say, this is what we have done so far, and this is how your media organization is faring in terms of ensuring ethical principles. As we go ahead, we are going to call for all these figureheads, editors in the newsrooms and the media organizations to come down, presenting these reports that we have done to them, to say, this is how far your organizations are faring. What is your commitment to ethics? What is your commitment to peace? What is your commitment to issues and not insults ahead of the elections and beyond? So it's part of a plan. This is the second report we have put out. As we move on, we are going to bring all these people together to hold a conversation and to engender discussions towards building peace and stability and ensuring that these ethical principles are upheld and then the abuse of language is reduced.
Away from the radio stations, for news websites, you found that there were unscreened or unregulated comments published below stories, and some readers of the news were engaged in invectives and peddling unsubstantiated allegations. What would your recommendation be for dealing with this problem?
Okay, and I think that perhaps at this point I have to say that your own news website, My Joy Online, happens to be one of the culprits of this. So when the news reports are published on the website, they leave the comment section, which often comes immediately below the news stories, unregulated. That's where people come in there to peddle falsehood, to make unsubstantiated allegations, to trade in invectives and insults, and you realize that the editors pay no attention to these places. They don't screen, they don't edit as much as they pay attention to the story. So our recommendation is that perhaps it's about time that the editors also pay attention to this comment section. Whether you like it or not, it appears on your website. There's a web link that leads to these insults. And so it's part of what you are allowing others to see as part of the gatekeeping rule. If you are failing in that, then perhaps you are failing even in the whole process of publishing a story. So whatever comments that appear on your website, we deem it to be a comment that an editor has seen and allows it to be there. So our recommendation is that they have to pay attention, look at them, regulate those contents. The one that they think it's not right, perhaps they have to reach out to whoever is making, or take actions to make sure that the comment section, as much as the news story itself, are decent, consistent with the ethical principles that guides all of us.
What would you say to someone who says that, oh, you say that your highest violated principle is decency, but decency, really, what's the potential of decency to derail development or to affect, the peace we enjoy in this country? What would you tell someone who holds that notion?
Well, perhaps the person would need to understand what decency as a principle means. And indeed, in the report, in the statement we release, we give a link to the principles as it has been explained, so that anybody who wants to go ahead to read what decency would mean would understand. But since you brought it up, let me quickly explain. Decency, brings into fore a lot of things. So insults, stating things that we call unprintable, unethical statement, abusive language, in any form of it comes under decency. So somebody can say the worst of things, in that category, and it comes under decency. So decency is really a big issue that we have to pay attention to. They are not just, something that we think is decent or is indecent, but all forms of insults, all forms of abusive language are forms of decency that comes under that category.
Finally, what informed your decision to focus on only Akan-speaking radio stations? Okay,
to start with, this is about the third time we are doing this media ethics project. Since 2012, we've been doing this project. And from our experience and from the lessons and recommendations we have made from the previous ones, it stands out that the Akan-speaking radio stations, when compared with the English-speaking ones, have a lot of violations. There seem to be a way that these Akan language radio stations breach or violate the ethical principles as compared with the English-speaking radio stations. And so we think that if indeed we are looking for where we can find violations to control, if we are looking for where infractions of ethics happen, it is the Akan language radio stations that we have to pay attention to.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Kweku Asante is Program Officer at the Media Foundation for West Africa, and we've been discussing their latest report on ethical violations in the media. Now, non-governmental agencies working in water and sanitation sector have disputed the sanitation minister's rating about how clean Accra has become. She said the Akufo-Addo administration has made significant strides towards making Accra the cleanest city in Africa. But addressing the media as part of a sanitation tour and cleanup exercise in parts of Mamobi Tuesday, the sanitation minister said the objective was realized during this year's lockdown as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, though the gains have since eroded.
Of environmental cleanliness and general sanitation. because we are doing sanitation or cleaning every day. But some issues like clogging the drains becomes a bigger issue for the residents. Hence the presence of Zoom Lion and the squad or team, the military, to assess the situation, because normally we work hand in hand with them, and then the assembly also. So we came here this morning to assess the situation and to make sure the drains are rid of these plastics, because if they are not removed, access for water flow will be difficult. Yes.
And one of the promises elections was to make Accra the cleanest city.
Yes, and you saw it during the lockdown.
Yes. And how far would that promise?
I will give it 85%, because at the end of the day, you all saw the 100% we did during the lockdown. So who makes Accra dirty? Us. That's why we are every day sensitizing people to make sure. I'm telling you, I know you will quote it, and I insist it's 85. You will rate it maybe 100%. Thank you.
While Emmanuel Ade, who's an expert in the sector, disputes the minister's ratings.
100% sanitation is where all the drains are very clean and most of them even covered, where we have sustainable systems in place to always ensure that those drains are clean. All the rubbish and refuse and waste that you see have some systems that are sustainable, that are self-monitoring, right? I don't think if you organize regular cleanups in communities, that is the solution to the problem, because people will still go back and litter. So where are the laws? How are we enforcing them? What are the systems in place to ensure that people even don't dare to litter? How often do waste management service providers, evacuate the waste as they accumulate in the cities? Look at the drains. People have even connected their household effluent into the drains, and sometimes even their toilets, they flush directly into drains. Look at the Odor River. How clean is it? Can't it be like a tourist site where people go and be cruising for recreation? These are some of the parameters that some of us look for. And also everybody having access to decent household toilets so that they will not be compelled to go queuing at public toilets, or even worse still, to go defecating in the bush or along the drains or at the seashore. These are some of the things that some of us look for in the cleanest city. But to this very particular question, I don't know what parameters that government, or let me say the minister, is using.
But here's something that's very familiar from what you've narrated. Everything that you've said is actually what, from my point of view, we're experiencing here in this city. What you said shouldn't be happening is what is happening. So let's use your own assessment, because you do a lot of monitoring. Rates us in terms of this city today, Accra.
In my own assessment, I don't even believe we are up to 25% clean. If we are talking about cleanest city in Africa, there are much cleaner cities on the continent than what we have in Accra. We have Pretoria, Johannesburg, Kigali. I mean, all these cities, we don't match them in any way. So I don't think we are cleanest now. And if I was to monitor and rate, I would not give it beyond 30%.
30%?
30.
Okay. But do you appreciate the parameters that she used, though?
That is what I don't know yet, because based on the clip that we just saw, I don't know which parameters she used. But then she seems to be making reference to cleanups where we clean and you see all the compound, the whole community, the whole area clean. That one, yes, you can see that everything is clean, so it's 100%. But you leave it behind, and for minutes or maybe for some few hours, you see the rubbish back into the drains, back into the streets. You see people continuing to litter. So I don't know which parameters she used, but if the parameters was just about mobilizing people to clean an area within some few hours or within a few days, well, she could be right, but some of us don't see it that way. If we